Before writing, before kings carved their names into stone, before history had dates, laws, or archives, human memory lived in firelight, footprints, bones, tools, graves, and stories whispered under cold stars. This was not a silent world. It was a world trying desperately not to forget. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of ancient history and mystery you enjoy. A hunter stops at the edge of a riverbank before sunrise. Long before any hand presses a wedge into clay or scratches a royal name into stone, mist lies low over the water, hiding the far bank. And somewhere beyond it, a herd moves through reeds, making the faint sound of bodies brushing grass. The hunter carries no map. No mark tells him where the animals crossed last year. No carved sign records where the ice broke, or where the old people say the river changes its mind after heavy rain. Yet he knows. He knows because the slope of the land has been walked into memory. He knows because stories have been repeated beside fires until they have become almost as physical as the stones underfoot. He knows because a scar on a tree, a bend in the current, a patch of bitter plants, and a bird call at the wrong hour all belong to a language that has not yet become writing. This is the ancient world before writing, and it is not empty silence. It is crowded with memory. But memory lives differently here. It moves through breath, rhythm, gesture, imitation, and place. It clings to tools darkened by use, to hearths rebuilt in the same spot, to trails that return with the seasons, to elders teaching the young how to split flint without ruining the edge. Nothing is written down, yet almost nothing important is left alone. Knowledge has to travel from body to body. It has to survive hunger, weather, fear, illness, migration, and the danger of forgetting. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. To enter this older world is to step beyond recorded names and dated events, into a human past where the evidence remains incomplete, and where the most important things were often the easiest to lose. For most of human existence, there are no archives, no letters, no laws, no chronicles announcing kings. There are landscapes, bones, tools, ash, pigments, footprints, graves, moved stones, and objects shaped with care. Writing arrives very late in the human story. By the time the first durable writing systems appear, people have already crossed continents, survived ice ages, buried their dead, made art, exchanged materials over long distances, watched stars, raised children, invented traps, baskets, clothing, shelters, music, ritual, and explanations for how the world came to be. The absence of writing does not mean the absence of thought. It means that thought leaves traces in ways that are harder to read. A person living before writing is not living before history in any simple sense. History begins wherever human lives unfold through time. What changes with writing is the kind of memory that survives. A tablet can preserve a ration list, a name, or a debt long after the speaker is gone. Before that, memory is vulnerable, but deeply woven into daily life. A path is remembered because feet keep taking it. A hunting rule survives because a mistake can mean starvation. A marriage alliance is remembered because relatives repeat it. The record is not held in one place. It is distributed across people, habits, landscapes, and objects. Imagine a small group moving through a familiar valley at the end of a dry season. Their world is not vague to them, it is precise. The slope where deer appear at dusk is different from the slope where loose stones slide underfoot. The spring that tastes metallic after storms is different from the spring that stays clear through drought. Children learn these distinctions not from written lessons, but by being corrected, guided, teased, and shown. An elder may point with the chin rather than the finger. A parent may demonstrate which leaves can be eaten only after soaking. A skilled maker may pass a flake of stone to a younger hand, letting the tool explain what speech alone cannot. Learning happens while walking, cutting, carrying, waiting, and watching. The surprising thing is how much of this can survive without becoming writing. Archaeologists find repeated patterns in stone tools across vast regions and long stretches of time, suggesting traditions passed down with remarkable stability. A way of preparing a core, striking a blade, polishing an axe, piercing a shell, or arranging a hearth can persist because people teach one another what works and what feels right. Scholars still debate how much meaning can be recovered from these patterns. A row of stones may be a windbreak, a marker, a ritual boundary, or the leftover logic of a vanished camp. A cluster of animal bones may show dinner, ceremony, waste, or all three at once. The ancient world before writing constantly offers evidence that is real, but not always obedient. Writing flatters later generations by making the past appear more certain than it really is. A tablet says grain was counted. A seal says goods were controlled. A king says he conquered. Even then, the truth may be partial or self-serving. Before writing, there is no such voice. Or rather, there are too many voices and none speak in words we can hear. The cracked skull, the healed bone, the careful bead, the blackened hearth, the red handprint on stone. The abandoned camp under sediment, each one is a fragment of testimony. None tells the whole story. Together they create something stranger than a chronicle, a world where human presence is undeniable. But human thought must be approached with patience. The first great challenge is to resist imagining this world as primitive darkness waiting for writing to rescue it. It is better understood as a different architecture of memory. It is fragile in some ways, resilient in others. It can preserve water sources, animal habits, toolmaking, kinship, and the fear of a dangerous place. But it can also lose a person's name forever. It can carry a story for centuries, while changing its details with every generation. What survives in the record suggests intelligence everywhere, but almost never in the form later civilizations teach us to expect. At sunrise, the hunter listens again. The mist thins. The herd is closer now, and behind him the others wait, reading his posture as carefully as he reads the land. No one writes the moment down. No one fixes his name for future centuries. Yet the decision he makes may be remembered, repeated, corrected, or absorbed into practice. If he chooses well, the group eats. If he chooses badly, the story may become a warning. Before writing, history does not vanish. It passes through living people. And that makes it powerful, intimate, and terribly vulnerable. By the time the sun lowers and the hunt becomes meat, hide, bone, grease, and smoke, the day's knowledge begins its second life. It is no longer only action. It becomes something carried into the dark, around the fire, where sparks rise into cold air and faces appear and vanish in orange light. Memory finds its oldest theatre. The fire is warmth, protection, cooking, and warning. But it is also a gathering point for attention. People who have spent the day scattered across a landscape come back into a circle. They bring news with them. They bring mistakes. They bring the location of tracks, the taste of water, the strange behavior of birds, the place where a child nearly stepped on a snake, the place where berries are late this year. Nothing is written, but the evening itself becomes a kind of archive. Speech before writing is not merely casual sound. It is a technology of survival. A story can hold directions without looking like a map. A song can carry the order of seasons. A repeated phrase can preserve the difference between a useful plant and a deadly one. A gesture made at the right moment can remind everyone where a taboo begins, where a boundary lies, or where grief still clings to the ground. The evidence remains incomplete, because voices do not fossilize. But the deep importance of oral memory is visible in the way human societies everywhere use repetition, rhythm, and performance to keep knowledge alive. Long before signs are pressed into clay, the spoken word already has structure, discipline, and weight. A child beside that fire does not receive the past as a list. The child receives it as atmosphere. The old ones do not need to announce that they are teaching history. They speak of a flood that came higher than expected, and the child learns caution around a dry riverbed. They speak of a ridge where animals once vanished into fog, and the child learns where not to wander alone. They imitate the call of a bird that signals honey, or danger, or rain. They laugh at someone who ignored advice and paid for it with bruises. Even humour carries instruction. A joke remembered for years may protect someone better than a rule recited once. This world depends on memory being memorable. That is why rhythm matters. Words tied to beat, movement, and melody are easier to keep. A plain instruction can slip away, but a chant can return when feet begin walking. A sequence of gestures can preserve the stages of making a tool or preparing food. A tale with repeated patterns can carry details through generations, even when listeners do not think of themselves as preserving data. Later written cultures often look back on oral societies as if they were unstable and vague, but that judgment is too easy. Oral memory can be astonishingly precise when precision matters. It can also change gracefully when circumstances change, which writing does not always do. Still, no single explanation fully accounts for how much can survive and how much is lost. Scholars still debate the depth of some oral traditions, especially when stories seem to preserve memories of old shorelines, eruptions, unusual animals, or ancient floods. In a few places around the world, researchers have argued that oral accounts may contain echoes of environmental events thousands of years old. Such claims must be handled carefully. It is tempting to turn every myth into a coded geological report, but that risks flattening human imagination into evidence for something else. A story can remember a landscape and transform it at the same time. It can preserve a warning, a moral order, a family claim, and a sacred geography all at once. Around the fire, memory is not separated into categories the way later libraries separate law, religion, science, and entertainment. The useful and the sacred may be one fabric. The movement of animals can belong to a story about ancestors. The stars can be both navigation and meaning. A hill can be a landmark, a burial place, a warning, and a presence. This is one of the hardest things for modern minds to enter. Writing encourages separation. It places one thing after another, labels them, stores them, and lets them be consulted alone. Before writing, knowledge often lives in relationship. To know a place is to know who may go there, what happened there, what season changes there, what danger waits there, and what story gives it force. Firelight also changes the way people imagine what is absent. In the dark beyond the circle, animals move unseen. The dead are absent but remembered. Faraway groups exist as rumour, alliance, threat, or kin. The past becomes near because someone speaks it into the present. A skilled storyteller can make a vanished person useful again, not as a written biography, but as example, warning, comfort, or claim. A long-dead hunter may still teach through the story of a failed crossing. A grandmother may still decide behaviour because her words are repeated when food is divided. In such moments, the dead remain socially active, though archaeologists can usually see only the bones and objects left behind. One lesser-known clue to this deep memory world lies not in words themselves, but in attention. Human beings are unusually good at shared attention, looking together, following a point, imitating action, understanding that another mind knows something worth learning. This ability turns a landscape into a classroom. A flint knapper does not only produce a tool, he produces a visible sequence. A gatherer does not only pick plants, she demonstrates timing, touch, and restraint. A tracker reads mud and broken grass while others watch his eyes and hands. The lesson may never be named, yet it passes on. Much of prehistory is likely built from this kind of silent teaching, reinforced later by story when the group returns to rest. The night deepens, and the fire becomes smaller. Grease pops on hot stones, smoke settles into hair and skins. The young drift towards sleep while older voices continue more quietly, braiding the day into older memory. Perhaps the hunt will become part of a seasonal pattern. Perhaps it will disappear into ordinary success. Perhaps a mistake will be remembered because someone nearly died. The boundary between event and story is porous here. A thing happens, then it is told, then it is retold. Then it becomes a rule, a warning, a place name, a ritual gesture, or a silence no one breaks. This is how the world before writing keeps itself from dissolving. It does not preserve everything. It cannot. Names fade. Exact days vanish. Arguments end without record. But what a community needs most urgently may be held with fierce care where to find water, when to move, who belongs, what must not be eaten, which animals are dangerous, which ancestors matter, which losses still shape the living. Before tablets and scrolls, memory sits close to the flame. It breathes through the living. And for that reason it must be repeated before sleep takes it away. The hand enters the story before the first mark becomes a letter. It closes around stone, bone, antler, wood, shell, sinew, hide, and fibre, and it begins to think through them. In the ancient world before writing, thought is not sealed away inside the skull. It is visible in the angle of a struck flake, the smoothness of a polished edge, the twist of cordage, the careful drilling of a bead, the balance of a spear point fitted to a shaft that has long since rotted away. A tool is never only an object. It is a memory of motion. It preserves, in hard material, the vanished rhythm of a body that knew what it was doing. To watch a skilled stoneworker is to see planning made physical. The maker does not simply smash rock until a useful piece appears. The maker studies the core, turns it, feels its weight, sees hidden lines of fracture that are invisible to the untrained eye. A blow must be placed with judgment. Too soft, and nothing useful happens. Too hard, and the stone breaks badly. The ancient maker carries in the hand a long inheritance of trial, teaching, failure, and refinement. No written manual explains the process, yet the result may be repeated with remarkable consistency across generations. What survives in the record suggests that some traditions of stone tool making remained stable for astonishing periods of time, not because people lacked imagination, but because the knowledge was precise, effective, and worth preserving. Stone lasts, so stone often dominates the archaeological record, but this can mislead the imagination. The world before writing is not a world made only of stone. Much of its intelligence is perishable. Wood becomes digging sticks, spear shafts, handles, bowls, frames, traps, paddles, and shelters, then disappears into soil. Fibres become nets, bags, mats, baskets, bindings, baby carriers, clothing, and cord, then decay unless rare conditions protect them. Hide becomes shoes, tents, straps. Containers, bedding, shields against weather, bone and antler become needles, points, harpoons, awls, and ornaments. The evidence remains incomplete because the softer half of human technology usually vanishes. Archaeology often shows us the teeth of the machine while the rest of the creature is gone. One of the most surprising details from deep prehistory is the importance of string. It sounds modest beside a hand axe or spear point, but cordage changes everything. With twisted fibre, people can bind a point to a shaft, make nets to catch fish or birds, tie bundles, build traps, suspend containers, weave clothing, and create structures stronger than loose parts alone. A piece of string is also a small act of abstraction. It requires selecting fibres, preparing them, twisting them in one direction, plying them in another, and trusting tension. Some of the oldest evidence for fibre technology survives only as impressions, residues, or associated tools, so scholars still debate how early and how widespread particular practices were. But the logic is clear before writing ties words together. Hands are already tying the material world into systems. The making of tools also creates social memory. A child does not learn a blade by hearing about sharpness in the abstract. The child watches chips fly. The child sees where adults place their fingers. The child hears the sound of a successful strike and the dull failure of a bad one. The body learns through repetition, and the group learns through correction. A badly made point may snap, a poorly scraped hide may rot, a weak knot may lose a catch. The consequences of technique are immediate, sometimes unforgiving. In this way, technology becomes a stern teacher, and every finished object carries the shadow of all the mistakes that shaped it. There is a quiet beauty in this kind of knowledge because it is both practical and deeply human. The same hand that kills an animal may later scrape the hide, cut the meat, pierce a shell, paint a wall, smooth a child's hair, or place an ornament near the dead. Categories that later cultures separate are not always separated here. A blade can be useful, beautiful, inherited, traded, displayed, or offered. A bead can decorate a body, mark belonging, signal skill, show exchange, or carry memory of a distant shore. A tool may be ordinary in one moment and ceremonial in another. No single explanation fully accounts for the meanings objects could hold, because use does not cancel symbolism, and symbolism does not cancel use. The thinking hand leaves another clue in where, under magnification, archaeologists can sometimes see the polish, striations, and tiny damage left when a tool cut meat, scraped hide, worked wood, harvested plants, or shaped bone. These traces are modest, almost ghostly, but they allow the silent object to speak in a limited way. A stone flake found in the ground may look simple to the eye, but its edge can preserve the memory of repeated contact with a vanished material. Even here, caution is necessary and experiments help, comparisons help, but the past is never reconstructed perfectly. The tool gives evidence, not confession. As hands make objects, objects also remake human life. A sharp blade extends the body, a container changes how far food can be carried, a needle changes how clothing fits, and fitted clothing changes survival in cold landscapes. A grinding stone changes plants into meals and hours of labour into dust. A trap allows a person to catch what cannot be chased. A boat, where it exists, changes water from barrier into passage. Each invention reshapes movement, diet, danger, cooperation, and imagination. Before writing records ownership or law, technology is already rearranging relationships among people, animals, seasons, and places. And yet, for all this skill, there is humility in the record. The most carefully made object cannot tell us the maker's name. A polished axe may outlive the hand that shaped it by thousands of years, but not the song sung while it was made. A bone needle can reveal clothing, climate, patience, and dexterity, but not the private worry of the person who used it near a winter fire. The ancient world before writing gives us craft without biography, intelligence without signature, achievement without monument in the usual sense. Its makers are everywhere and anonymous. By dawn, the fire has sunk into ash, and tools lie where sleep left them, a scraper dark with grease, a blade waiting for repair, fibres twisted beside a half-finished net, a wooden handle that will one day vanish without trace. To later eyes, these things may seem small. To the people who rely on them, they are the difference between hunger and food, exposure and warmth, wandering and return. Before marks become records, the hand records itself in matter. Every tool is a sentence without words, and every skilled movement is a line of memory passed forward before it disappears. Deep inside the cave, daylight gives up slowly. At first it follows the entrance in a pale wash-over stone, touching damp walls, broken rock, and the prints of animals that have used the shelter in bad weather. Then the passage narrows, turns, and the outside world begins to fall away. The air changes. It grows cooler, heavier, more mineral. Footsteps become louder than they should be. A flame held in one hand trembles against the ceiling, making the rock seem to move. And there, beyond the reach of ordinary life, bodies appear on the walls, horses with arched necks, bison heavy with muscle, deer, aurochs, lions, mammoths, abstract signs, red dots, black lines, and human hands pressed like sudden ghosts against stone. These caves are among the most haunting places in the ancient world before writing because they feel, at first glance, almost like messages. The images are not words, but they are deliberate. Someone carried pigment into darkness. Someone chose surfaces, prepared colours, climbed, crouched, reached, and returned. Some animals are drawn with astonishing sensitivity to movement and form. Others are simple, spare, almost symbolic, in places. The natural curves of the cave wall seem to become shoulders, bellies, or backs, as if the maker did not impose an image on stone but discovered an animal already waiting there. What survives in the record suggests a world of close observation, but observation alone does not explain why so much effort was spent in spaces where daily life rarely happened. The handprints are especially intimate. A hand placed on a stone, pigment blown around it, leaves a negative shape that is both presence and absence. The person is gone, but the outline remains. Some hands are small, some larger, some missing fingers or showing folded digits, though scholars still debate whether these shapes reflect injury, gesture, symbolic coding, frostbite, ritual practice, or the simple position of fingers when pigment was applied. They seem personal, yet not in the way a written name is personal. They do not say who the person was. They say only that a living body once stood there, breathing in the dark, close enough to stone to leave a trace. It is tempting to call this art and stop there, because the images are beautiful. But beauty may be only one part of their meaning, and perhaps not the central part. Some caves are difficult to access, requiring crawling, climbing, or moving through dangerous passages. Some images are placed deep underground, far from normal habitation. Some are layered over older images, suggesting return, renewal, correction, or changing significance over time. Some animals appear more often than their importance in the diet would predict, while animals frequently eaten may be less visible. No single explanation fully accounts for this. Hunting magic, initiation, trance experience, teaching, territorial memory, myth, seasonal ceremony, social identity, and communication with unseen forces have all been proposed in different forms. Some ideas are better supported than others, and many remain debated. Because the images survive without the voices that once surrounded them. The cave is not a gallery in the modern sense. It is a place of darkness, echo, danger, and altered perception. A flickering lamp does not reveal the whole wall evenly. It makes animals appear and disappear. A painted horse may seem to move as light passes over uneven stone. A bison may swell from the rock and retreat again. Sound behaves strangely underground. A footstep returns from somewhere unseen. A breath sounds larger. In such a place, image, body, and environment work together. The cave does not simply contain the paintings, it participates in them. This matters because before writing, memory is rarely separated from performance. An image may have been seen with movement, sound, fire, story, and gesture, not as a silent object viewed alone. There are also marks that resist easy interpretation: grids, dots, branching signs, repeated strokes, claviform shapes, and other abstract forms. Some researchers have suggested that certain marks may relate to animal behavior, seasonal knowledge, counting, or symbolic categories, while others urge caution, because patterns can tempt the modern mind into reading systems that may not be there. The evidence remains incomplete. These signs may represent communication, ritual shorthand, memory aids, clan marks, bodily experiences, or meanings now entirely lost. They remind us that the road toward writing is not a straight line from picture to alphabet. Humans can make signs for many reasons without turning them into script. Portable art carries the cave world into the open. Small carved animals, engraved bones, decorated antler, and figurines show that image making is not confined to deep chambers. Some figures emphasize bodies in ways that suggest fertility, identity, transformation, or social meaning, though scholars still debate their purpose. A carved mammoth or horse can fit in the hand, while a painted animal may stretch across a wall. Both show the same essential fact before writing. People are already storing attention in form. They are selecting what matters, repeating it, stylizing it, and giving it durability beyond the moment of speech. What is surprising is not only that these images exist, but that they often show such confidence. The makers know animals not as distant subjects, but as beings woven into survival and imagination. The heavy head of a bison, the alert line of a horse, the curve of a mammoth's back, the tension of a predator's body. These are not casual decorations. They come from long watching, yet the human figure is often rare, partial, masked, or ambiguous. The animal world dominates. Perhaps this reflects dependence, perhaps awe, perhaps a way of thinking in which human life is not yet placed at the centre, as later written kingdoms so often place it. The cave walls suggest that the ancient mind watches the non-human world with humility, fear, hunger, and fascination. Still, the caves do not let themselves be solved. They pull interpretation close, then withdraw. A handprint may feel like greeting, warning, signature, prayer, or proof of belonging. A painted animal may be memory, myth, instruction, or encounter. The same image may have changed meaning over centuries as people return to it. This is part of their power. Writing often narrows meaning by fixing words in order. Cave images open meaning by refusing to speak in one way only. When the flame finally turns back toward the entrance, the figures remain behind in darkness. Outside, wind moves across the valley, animals graze, children wake, tools need repair, food needs gathering, and ordinary life continues. But somewhere under the hill, the stone now holds bodies that are not bodies, memories that are not speech, and signs that are not yet writing. The cave has remembered what people could not carry in voice alone. It keeps the shape of hands, animals, and mystery, waiting for later ages to enter with lamps of their own and realize how much of the ancient world was thinking in images before it ever wrote a word. Under the living ground, beneath paths, shelters, hearths, and the thin floors of ancient camps, the dead begin to change the meaning of place. A body is not always left where it falls. Sometimes it is carried, sometimes it is folded carefully into a pit, sometimes it is covered with red ochre, surrounded by beads, tools, antler, bone, shell, stone, or the remains of animals. Sometimes the grave is shallow and practical. Sometimes it is so deliberate that even after thousands of years, the care still feels close. Before writing gives names to the dead, burial becomes one of the most powerful ways human beings make memory visible. A grave is a strange kind of message. It is not a sentence, and it does not explain itself, yet it tells us that someone stopped ordinary life long enough to deal with loss. A body had to be moved, arranged, covered, protected, marked, or revisited. The living had to make choices. Those choices may have been shaped by affection, fear, ritual, hygiene, social duty, or beliefs about what happens after death. No single explanation fully accounts for every burial. Because human death has never been only one thing. It is biological fact, social disruption, emotional wound, and very often, spiritual problem. In the ancient world before writing, graves are among the few places where these layers can still be seen together. The use of red ochre is one of the most haunting clues. This iron-rich pigment appears in many prehistoric contexts, sometimes on bodies, sometimes in graves, sometimes in art and ornament. Its colour resembles blood, earth, sunset, flesh, and fire depending on how it is seen. Later people have often imagined it as a symbol of life or rebirth, and that may be right in some cases, but the evidence remains incomplete. Ochre also has practical uses. It can preserve materials, colour skins, protect surfaces, and mark objects. The same substance can be useful and meaningful at once. When a skeleton lies stained red after tens of thousands of years, it is tempting to read intention too quickly, but it is equally difficult to believe the colour meant nothing. Burials reveal that identity existed long before written names. A person might be placed with ornaments, tools, animal parts, or objects that suggest age, skill, role, kinship, status, or belonging. Shell beads found far from the sea may hint at exchange networks or treasured objects carried across landscapes. Perforated animal teeth may show decoration, memory, or group identity. A tool in a grave may be a practical gift, a sign of the person's life, an offering. Or a symbol chosen by the living. Scholars still debate how far we can go in interpreting grave goods, especially when later assumptions about wealth, gender, and rank are projected backward into societies that may have understood identity very differently. Still, the presence of carefully chosen objects suggests that the dead could remain socially meaningful after breath had left them. There is also deep tenderness in some prehistoric graves. The remains of children, infants, and young people are sometimes treated with extraordinary care. In a few famous cases, graves contain thousands of beads or ornaments that would have required many hours of labour, perhaps more labour than the child could ever have earned in life. Such burials disturb simple ideas about prehistoric people as purely practical survivors. A community living close to hunger still spends time on the dead. They give effort to someone who can no longer hunt, gather, cook, carry, or repair. That effort is evidence of value beyond usefulness. It suggests grief, attachment, memory, and perhaps hope, though the exact feeling cannot be recovered from bone and bead alone. The body itself can speak quietly through its position. Some dead are laid extended, others are curled tightly, knees drawn close, as if returning to the shape of sleep or birth. Some are placed on their sides, some on their backs, some with hands near the face. Orientation may matter, though not always in ways we can understand. A head turned towards sunrise, a body aligned with a river, a grave placed near a dwelling, or a burial set apart from others may all carry meaning. But meaning can shift from one community to another. What looks symbolic may sometimes be practical. What looks practical may be symbolic. The grave is evidence, not a translation. Burials also complicate the boundary between the living and the dead. In some ancient settlements, the dead are placed beneath house floors or near places of daily activity. This is not simply disposal. It brings ancestors into the architecture of life. A family may cook, sleep, repair tools, and raise children above earlier generations. The ground becomes layered with belonging. The dead help anchor people to place, even when no written deed claims the land. What survives in the record suggests that memory can be territorial without maps, legal without documents, intimate without inscriptions. A house may stand partly because the dead are beneath it. Not every death receives the same treatment. This is important. Some bodies are buried with care, others not at all, and many leave no trace. Preservation is uneven, and human choices were uneven too. Difference in burial may reflect status, circumstance, age, kinship, violence, disease, exclusion, emergency, or later disturbance. A missing grave does not mean a missing belief. A simple burial does not mean an unloved life. Archaeologists must work with what survived, while knowing that what survived is only a fraction of what happened. The silence around most ancient individuals is immense. Some graves hint at violence or hardship. Healed fractures show people surviving injuries long enough to be cared for. Diseased bones suggest long suffering. Bodies with embedded points or traumatic wounds reveal conflict, accident, or killing. Yet even here, caution matters. A wound does not always reveal a story's beginning or end. A person struck by violence may still be buried with honour. A disabled person may have lived for years because others fed and protected them. These details are among the most moving traces of prehistoric social life. They show that survival was not always solitary strength. Sometimes survival depended on patience, care, and the willingness of a group to carry its vulnerable members. Graves are also where time begins to thicken. A burial can transform an ordinary patch of earth into a remembered place. People may return to it, avoid it, build near it, build over it, or place later dead beside earlier ones, over generations. This can create cemeteries, ancestral grounds, and landscapes of memory before a single name is written. The living learn where the dead lie because others tell them, point to the place, renew the marker, or repeat the story. When writing finally appears much later, it often carves names into stone. But the older act is simpler and deeper to put the dead into the earth and remember where. As evening falls over an ancient camp, the grave is no longer open. The soil has been pressed down, perhaps stones have been placed above it, perhaps ochre still stains the hands of those who worked. The living return to fire, food, children, tools, weather, and sleep. But the ground has changed. It now holds someone who once knew the same paths, feared the same dark, and heard the same stories. Before writing preserves names, burial preserves relationship. It tells us that the ancient world was not only a world of survival, it was a world of grief shaped into action, memory placed beneath the feet, and love or fear or duty given form in earth. A place begins to remember when people return to it often enough. At first, the signs are light, a scatter of stone flakes near a sheltered wall, a black stain where fire has burned again and again, cracked bones left after meals, a hollow where posts once stood, a worn path descending toward water. Nothing yet resembles a city, or even a permanent village in the later sense. The world is still mobile, seasonal, and alert to change. People follow animals, plants, weather, and water. They leave when food thins or cold deepens, yet in certain favoured places, the rhythm of return grows stronger, a camp becomes familiar, a hearth is rebuilt, a burial makes the ground heavier with memory, a storage pit waits beneath the soil, slowly, without any written boundary or carved title deed. Place begins to hold human life in a new way. This change does not happen everywhere at once, and it does not move in a simple straight line from wandering to settlement. That old picture is too neat. Many mobile foragers know their landscapes with far more precision than later farmers know their fields. Many return to the same caves, lake edges, river crossings, coastlines, and seasonal camps for generations. Some groups remain highly mobile while building rich traditions and complex social worlds. Others become more settled for part of the year, then move again. Scholars still debate how best to describe these transitions, because the evidence often shows a spectrum rather than a clean break. What matters is not that people suddenly stop moving. It is that some places begin to gather more labour, more objects, more dead, more memory, and more expectation. A good seasonal camp is not chosen randomly. It may stand where migrating animals pass, where fish run at predictable times, where nuts or grains ripen nearby, where reeds, wood, stone, clay, shellfish, or fresh water are close at hand. The landscape offers a temporary abundance, and people learn to arrive when it is ready. In such places, knowledge becomes tied not only to movement, but to return. The same bend in the river is remembered, the same stand of trees is watched, the same slope is searched for early plants. Children grow up hearing that this is where people come when the days shorten, or when the salmon rise, or when the grass seeds are heavy, or when the herds cross the valley. The calendar is not written, but it is walked. Hearths are among the quiet anchors of this world. A hearth is practical to us, of course. It cooks food, warms bodies, hardens points, dries meat, smokes hides, and keeps darkness at a distance. But when a hearth is used repeatedly, it also creates a centre. Around it, stories gather, tools are repaired, children sleep, decisions are made, people sit in positions that may reflect age, kinship, skill, or habit. Ash builds in layers, charcoal sinks into soil. The fire marks the spot where life has paused long enough to leave a stain. Thousands of years later, Archaeologists may find that stain and see not a dramatic monument, but a small persistence people came back. The house, when it appears, intensifies this relationship. Early houses vary enormously. Some are light shelters of wood, skin, brush, or reed, leaving almost nothing behind. Others are sunken floors, post holes, stone foundations, packed clay surfaces, or circular structures with repeated rebuilding. A house is not just protection from weather, it is an investment in returning. It says that labour can be placed here because here matters. A roof changes sleep, walls change privacy. A floor changes storage, a doorway changes the way bodies enter and leave. Even a simple structure creates an inside and an outside, a small ordering of the world. Storage may be even more revolutionary than shelter. To store food is to argue with time. A pit lined and covered, a basket sealed, a cache hidden in dry ground, a structure raised against pests. All of these turn seasonal abundance into future survival. But storage also creates new tensions. Stored food can be stolen, guarded, shared, inherited, controlled, spoiled, or counted. It ties people to places because what has been hidden or built must be watched. It makes return more urgent. A group may leave part of itself behind in the form of food waiting under earth. Before writing records, debts, or inventories, storage already asks dangerous questions: who filled this pit? Who may open it? Who decides when hunger is serious enough? In this more settled rhythm, objects accumulate. A highly mobile group must carry carefully and abandon reluctantly. A more anchored camp can afford heavier tools grinding stones, large mortars, storage vessels, building materials, nets, posts, carved objects, and supplies that would be burdensome on a long journey. The ground becomes cluttered with work. Plant processing may increase. Fish bones, seed remains, nutshells, and grinding ware begin to tell stories of diet and labour. One lesser-known detail is how much time such abundance can demand. Gathering wild grains, cracking nuts, drying fish, smoking meat, and protecting stored food may produce plenty. But plenty is not the same as ease. A settled horizon can be rich and exhausting at the same time. The dead, already placed beneath living ground in earlier memory, now deepen the bond. When burials lie near houses or within settlements, they turn residents into ancestry. The people who come back are not only returning to resources, they are returning to their dead. A camp becomes more than convenient. It becomes claimed by memory, not necessarily claimed in the later legal sense, with borders and documents, but claimed through use, story, labour, and grief. What survives in the record suggests that some communities begin to build place-based identities long before writing can name them. The soil itself becomes a witness. Yet the shift towards settled life carries risks. A larger group staying longer in one place can exhaust nearby resources, spread waste, attract pests, invite conflict, and become vulnerable when climate shifts or animals change routes. Sedentism is not automatically progress. It solves some problems while creating others. Disease can move more easily among people living close together. Stored food can fail. Social tensions may sharpen when people cannot simply separate and move away. The ancient record does not show a simple march toward improvement. It shows human communities experimenting with ways to belong to land without being trapped by it. In these early settled horizons, memory begins to change shape. The old memory of trails and seasonal movement remains, but it is joined by memory of rooms, floors, posts, pits, walls, graves, and work areas. A child can point to a corner and know who slept there. An elder can remember when a roof was repaired after heavy rain. A family can return to a storage pit dug by hands now gone. Knowledge is still spoken, sung, demonstrated, and embodied, but it increasingly has addresses. It attaches itself to built things. As twilight settles over one of these ancient places, smoke rises from several hearths instead of one. Dogs may move at the edge of the camp. Fish dry on racks. Seeds wait in baskets. Tools too heavy to carry far lie near walls. Beneath the floor, Perhaps an ancestor sleeps in folded silence. No inscription announces the name of the place. No map fixes its boundary. But the ground has begun to gather a human past thick enough to be returned to, defended, mourned, and rebuilt before writing. Settlement teaches memory to stay. Stone changes the scale of memory. A hearth can remember a night. A house can remember a family. A grave can remember a body. But a monument asks the landscape to remember for generations, somewhere on a windswept ridge. Long before writing gives rulers their titles or cities their archives, people begin moving stones that no single person needs for shelter, cooking, or cutting. They drag them, raise them, stack them, circle them, bury them, align them, and return to them. The work is slow, heavy, and unnecessary in the narrowest practical sense, which makes it all the more revealing. A monument is labour turned into meaning. It says that a community has begun to imagine time beyond the immediate season. These early stone places appear in many forms, and they do not all belong to one tradition or one idea. Some are cairns heaped over the dead, some are standing stones set alone in open ground, some form circles, avenues, chambers, tombs, or enclosures. Some rise from grassy plains, some from coastal headlands, some from desert margins, some from hills already old with paths and burials. Later people often see them as puzzles, as if their main purpose were to challenge the future. For the builders, they likely stood inside a living world of story, ceremony, movement, ancestry, and obligation. The evidence remains incomplete, because stone survives while the songs, gestures, feasts, fears, and arguments around it vanish. To build with great stones requires more than strength. It requires agreement, or at least organised pressure. Someone must choose the place. Someone must know where the stone can be found. Someone must plan the route, prepare the ground, gather food for workers, shape timbers or ropes, time the labour, and decide when the work is finished. Even without written plans, such projects reveal coordination. They show that memory has become collective enough to command bodies across days, months, or years. A stone monument is therefore not only a religious or burial structure, it is also a fossil of cooperation. The surprising detail is that many early monuments are not as simple as they first appear. Some were built in stages, altered, closed, reopened, expanded, or deliberately transformed. A stone circle may not have begun as the circle later visitors see. A tomb may have received bodies over time, then been sealed, then remembered differently. A mound may cover earlier activity, older pits, smaller structures, or traces of feasting. Monumental landscapes are often palimpsests. Though the word belongs to writing, one layer does not erase another completely. Instead, memory accumulates in place, with each generation adding weight to what came before. The dead are often close to this story, but death does not explain everything. Chambered tombs, cairns, and burial mounds turn bodies into anchors of territory and ancestry. They make the invisible line of descent visible in earth and stone. To place ancestors within a monument is to give the living a reason to return and a claim that can be felt even if it is never written. Yet some monumental sites contain few or no burials, or burials that appear only after earlier phases of use. Some seem connected to gatherings, exchange, seasonal movement, ritual performance, or the marking of sky and horizon. Scholars still debate the balance between tomb, temple, calendar, meeting place, and symbol of identity. No single explanation fully accounts for all of them. Alignment with the sky is one of the most famous and most easily exaggerated parts of the story. Many ancient builders clearly watched the sun, moon, and stars with care. A stone placed toward a solstice sunrise or a passage lit at a particular time of year can tie human ceremony to the turning of the heavens. But not every stone alignment is an ancient observatory, and not every coincidence is intention. The challenge is to separate careful pattern from modern desire. What survives in the record suggests that some monuments did frame celestial events, yet their meaning was probably more than astronomy. The rising sun might mark a season, but it might also mark renewal, ancestry, death, fertility, gathering, or the return of obligations. To stand among such stones is to feel how they change space. A plain becomes a centre, A hill becomes a destination. A route becomes ceremonial because feet approach it in a repeated way. The body notices enclosure, height, shadow, and distance. A stone taller than a person alters posture. A narrow entrance slows movement. A chamber makes sound intimate. A mound hides and reveals. The builders understood these effects without needing architectural theory. They knew that space could be shaped to make people feel small, connected, solemn, watched, or included. Stone also outlives memory in dangerous ways. A monument can remain after its meaning has faded, inviting later people to reuse it, fear it, loot it, honour it, or invent new stories around it. Many such places became surrounded by folklore long after their builders were gone. Giants, spirits, saints, devils, lost kings, and buried treasure were later imagined into stones whose original names were forgotten. These later stories are not reliable guides to the first purpose, but they show something important even when meaning breaks. The monument continues to demand explanation. Stone keeps asking to be remembered. There is a quiet contradiction here. People build monuments to defeat forgetting, yet the monuments often survive without the very memories they were meant to hold. The names of the builders disappear. The reasons become uncertain. The ceremonies dissolve. What remains is mass, placement, weathering, and the stubborn fact of labour. Archaeologists can measure stones, date charcoal, analyse bones, trace quarry sources, and reconstruct construction phases. But the inner force of the act is harder to reach. Why this hill? Why this stone? Why this arrangement? The answers may have been obvious to the builders and invisible to us. Still, the monuments reveal a threshold in human life before writing. They show communities thinking in centuries. They show that memory has become architectural. A story once carried by voice is now reinforced by a place that cannot easily be moved. A burial once hidden beneath a floor is now magnified into a mound seen from afar. A seasonal gathering becomes fixed around a stone centre. The landscape itself is edited, not with script, but with weight. As night comes over the ridge, the stones darken first at their bases, then along their weathered faces, until they stand like fragments of older darkness against the sky. People may have gathered there with torches, food, bodies, offerings, songs, or silence. Children may have learned where to stand, when to approach, which stone mattered, which story belonged to the horizon. No inscription preserves the ceremony. No carved sentence explains the builder's intentions, yet the stones remain, holding open a space between the living and the dead, the earth and the sky, the remembered and the unknowable. Before writing fixes memory into signs. Stone gives memory weight. Counting begins quietly, almost humbly, long before numbers are written as signs in a formal script. It begins with remembering how many hides are drying near the fire, how many baskets of seeds are stored beneath a floor, how many animals were promised to relatives after a feast, how many days remain before a group should return to the river, how many people must be fed when guests arrive from beyond the hills. For a long time, the human mind can hold these things through habit, speech, and shared awareness. But as settlements grow heavier, as storage deepens, as exchange widens, and as obligations become more tangled, memory needs help. The village begins to count before it knows that counting will one day lead toward writing. The first aids to memory are often simple things: a notch cut into bone, a mark scratched on antler, a line of pebbles arranged and rearranged, a set of shells, a group of clay shapes held in a container, a cord tied with knots, a stick marked after each event. Not all such objects are easy to interpret. A row of incisions may count animals, lunar phases, days of travel, successful hunts, ritual acts, or something else entirely. Scholars still debate the purpose of many prehistoric tally marks, because repeated lines can look mathematical without proving what was being counted. Yet the larger pattern is clear. Humans are beginning to move memory outside the body. A thought once held in speech or recollection is being placed into matter. This is a profound shift, though it may not have felt profound at the time. No one needs to invent writing in a single moment. A person only needs to solve a small problem. A basket is full, and someone wants to remember its contents. A debt is owed, and someone wants proof. A herd increases, and someone wants to know how much has changed. A ritual must be repeated after a certain interval, and someone wants to mark the waiting. Practical pressure creates marks before philosophy gives them names. The village does not wake one morning and decide to create abstract record-keeping. It simply discovers, again and again, that memory can be assisted by objects. Clay is especially important because it is soft before it is permanent. A small lump can be shaped into a cone, sphere, disc, or cylinder. It can stand for something without resembling it. It can be counted, stored, sealed, or exchanged. In parts of the ancient Near East, clay tokens appear long before full writing, and many researchers connect them to systems of accounting for goods such as grain, animals, oil, or labour. The details remain debated, and no single explanation fully accounts for every token or mark. But the principle is striking. A little object can represent another object. A sheep can be absent, yet a token can make that sheep socially present. A jar of grain can be stored elsewhere, yet a clay counter can hold its memory. This is where abstraction enters the village by the back door. A shape token is not food, not an animal, not a tool, not a person. It is a stand-in. It asks people to agree that this thing means that thing. Such agreement is fragile at first, depending on custom and shared trust. But once a community accepts it, the world changes. Quantity can be separated from the object counted. 3 sheep, 3 baskets, 3 days, and 3 workers are not the same. Yet the idea of threeness begins to hover behind them. This does not mean people suddenly think like later accountants or mathematicians. It means that everyday life is creating mental habits that writing will later depend on. Sealing makes the matter even more interesting. A container can be closed. A lump of clay can be pressed over a knot or opening. A seal can mark who approved or protected something. Before written signatures, impressions and repeated designs can create identity, authority, and accountability. A sealed storage jar or bundle says, in effect, that someone has a claim, a role, or a responsibility. The mark does not speak in words, but it changes behaviour. It warns against opening. It remembers control. It allows trust at a distance, though trust is never perfect. Where goods accumulate, temptation accumulates too, and record-keeping grows partly from suspicion. This is a lesser-known doorway into the ancient mind before writing administration may be older than literature. The first durable marks are not necessarily poems, myths, or royal boasts. In many places, they are closer to lists, counts, seals, property marks, and economic records. That fact can feel disappointing if one expects writing to begin with grand stories. But it is also revealing. Human beings may sing for thousands of years without needing to write a song down. A debt, however, can cause trouble by mourning. Grain, sheep, beer, labour, and land create friction. The earliest push toward writing is often not beauty, but bookkeeping, and there is a dry humour in that. Civilization's memory may begin with someone trying to make sure no one walks away with the wrong number of goats. Yet counting is never merely cold. Behind every token or tally are bodies and relationships. A counted basket may mean winter security. A counted herd may mean marriage payment, feast obligation, ritual sacrifice, or survival after drought. A marked bone may belong to a hunter remembering success, a watcher tracking the moon, a maker measuring repeated work, or a community preserving ritual order. The object is small, but the anxiety behind it can be large. Counting appears when the world becomes too socially dense to rely on memory alone. The village that counts is also the village that compares. One household has more stored grain than another. One lineage contributes more animals to a feast. One worker owes more days. One field yields better. One shrine receives more offerings. Numbers sharpen difference. They can support fairness, but they can also expose inequality. A spoken promise can be softened, forgotten, or renegotiated. A mark is harder to deny. Before writing fully arrives, counting already begins to alter power. Because whoever controls the record controls part of reality. At dusk, someone presses a small clay shape into a basket with others like it. Someone else cuts another notch into bone. A sealed jar cools beside a wall. A child watches without understanding that these small gestures belong to a very long transformation. The fire still holds stories. The elders still carry memory. The land is still read through tracks, seasons, and returning paths. But now memory has begun to detach itself from breath. It can sit in a hand, wait in a pit, hang from a cord, or dry in clay. Before writing learns to speak, counting teaches matter how to remember. The counted village does not remain still. Around its storage pits and hearths, a slower revolution is already taking hold, one that begins not with kings or walls, but with seeds, hooves, weather, and waiting. People who once returned to places because wild abundance arrived there at the right season now begin to interfere more deliberately with that abundance. They clear patches of ground. They favour certain plants over others. They gather the largest grains, the least brittle stalks, the animals easiest to manage, the young that can be watched instead of hunted. At first, the change may be almost invisible from one generation to the next. A field is not born in a day. A herd is not created by a single decision. Farming and herding emerge through countless small acts of attention, habit, pressure, and accident. This is one of the great turning points before writing, but it is not a simple story of improvement. Later civilizations often look back at agriculture as the foundation of settled life, abundance, and power, and in one sense that is true. Fields can feed more people on less land than many forms of foraging. Herds can turn grass, scrub, and seasonal movement into meat, milk, hides, wool, dung, and social wealth. Stored grain can carry a community through lean months. But the evidence remains incomplete and uneven, and what survives in the record suggests a more complicated bargain. Farming gives, but it also takes. It changes time, it changes bodies, it changes obligation. It can make life more secure and more exhausting at once. A forager reads many clocks ripening fruit, animal migrations, tides, rainfall, cold, flowering plants, and the movement of birds. A farmer is tied to a narrower and more demanding calendar. There is a time to clear, a time to sow, a time to weed, a time to guard, a time to harvest, a time to thresh, grind, dry, store, and protect. Miss one window badly enough, and hunger follows. The field creates a future that must be served before it arrives. People begin labouring not only for today's meal, but for a harvest months away. This long obedience to plants is one of agriculture's quiet revolutions. Human life bends around the needs of species that cannot move. Domesticated plants carry the traces of this relationship in their bodies. Seeds become larger, stalks change in ways that keep grain from scattering naturally, which helps humans harvest but makes the plant more dependent on them. Roots, fruits, and pulses shift under repeated selection. None of this requires early farmers to understand genetics. They only need to notice what grows well, what stores well, what tastes better, what fills a basket, what survives drought. What animals do not ruin too quickly. Over many generations, these preferences reshape the living world. The field becomes a memory system written not in script, but in plant bodies. Herding creates another kind of memory, one that moves on legs. A herd must be watched, counted, bred, defended, led to water, protected from predators, and kept from eating what must be saved. Animals become wealth, but wealth that can wander away, fall sick, starve, reproduce, or be stolen. They also transform landscapes. Goats strip shrubs, sheep crop grass, cattle trample paths and open ground. Dung fertilizes fields and fuels fires where wood is scarce. A living herd ties people to roots, seasons, neighbours, and conflict. Scholars still debate the exact pathways by which different animals were domesticated in different regions, but the broad pattern is clear once humans begin managing animal reproduction. They are no longer only hunters in the old sense. They have become partners, masters, dependents, and prisoners of the herd all at once. Food changes the human body as well as the landscape. Grain can support larger populations, but grain-heavy diets can be hard on teeth and bones, especially when compared with more varied diets. Grinding introduces grit into flour, wearing down teeth. Stored foods can rot or attract pests. Living close to animals increases exposure to diseases that may cross between species. Larger settlements create sanitation problems unknown to smaller, more mobile groups. None of this means farming was a mistake, but it does mean abundance has a shadow. The agricultural world may produce more food overall while leaving many individuals with harder labour, narrower diets, and new illnesses. No single explanation fully accounts for why farming spread so widely, because choice, necessity, climate change, population pressure, opportunity, and social competition likely all played roles in different places. One lesser-known consequence is how agriculture alters the value of labour inside a community. Fields need repeated work, and some of that work is tiring, repetitive, and easy to overlook in grand histories. Weeding, grinding grain, hauling water, tending fires, repairing storage, watching children near animals, cleaning hides, processing milk, making baskets, guarding crops from birds. These tasks do not create monuments, but they sustain the world that later monuments depend on. The ancient record often preserves stone walls better than sawbacks. It preserves storage pits better than the hands that filled them. Yet without this daily labour, there is no surplus, and without surplus, the later rise of temples, chiefs, scribes, and cities becomes difficult to imagine. Surplus also sharpens inequality. When food can be stored, it can be accumulated. When animals can be counted, they can be compared. When fields require defence, boundaries become more serious. A family with better land, more workers, or more animals can begin to stand apart. Feasts may create generosity, but generosity can become a strategy. A leader who gives grain in a hungry season may gain loyalty. A shrine that receives offerings may become a storehouse. A debt of food or labour may begin as neighbourly help and end as obligation. Before writing records contracts, the social pressure of owing already exists. The field also changes belief. Seeds vanish into earth and return multiplied. Animals are born, sacrificed, milked, bred, and buried. Rain becomes fate, drought becomes terror, pests become disaster. The world of farming is full of dependency on forces no one controls. Rituals around planting, harvest, fertility, ancestors, and animals may grow stronger because uncertainty grows stronger too. Archaeologists can find figurines, special deposits, animal remains, unusual buildings, and repeated practices, but interpretation remains cautious. What looks like religion may also be household custom, seasonal celebration, social negotiation, or all of these at once. By evening, a farming village has a different sound from a mobile camp. Grain is being ground on stone. Animals shift in pens. Smoke rises from dung and wood. Stored seeds wait in darkness. People look toward the sky with concern, because the clouds matter differently now. A failed hunt is frightening. A failed harvest can be catastrophic. The old memory of trails, caves, fires, burials, stones, and stories has not disappeared, but it has been joined by a heavier memory of fields and herds. The ancient world before writing is becoming richer, denser, more productive, and more trapped in its own success. Abundance has arrived, but it has brought ledgers in the mind long before ledgers exist in clay. Beyond the fields and pens, beyond the smoke of villages and the guarded darkness of storage pits, another kind of memory begins to stretch across distance. A piece of black volcanic glass appears far from the mountain where it was born. A shell from a coast lies in an inland grave. A greenstone axe travels farther than the person who polished it may ever have walked. Salt, ochre, amber, flint, beads, animal hides, woven fibres, dried foods, and rare stones move from hand to hand. Crossing rivers, forests, mountains, deserts, and seas long before anyone writes a contract, draws a map, or stamps a merchant's name into clay. The ancient world before writing is not isolated, it is threaded together by exchange. Trade, at first, may be too sharp a word. It suggests markets, prices, merchants, and formal bargains, and much of the earlier movement of goods probably happens through relationships rather than commerce, in the later sense. Objects pass as gifts, marriage ties, ritual obligations, seasonal meetings, peace offerings, alliances, debts, hospitality, imitation, or quiet pressure. A person may give something not because its value has been calculated, but because giving creates a bond that must one day be answered. Scholars still debate how to distinguish trade from gift exchange in many prehistoric contexts, because the object survives while the social meaning does not. A shell bead in a grave tells us that distance has been crossed, but not exactly why. Obsidian is one of the clearest witnesses. It forms in volcanic landscapes, sharp, glossy, and unmistakable when studied carefully. Because different volcanic sources have distinct chemical signatures, archaeologists can sometimes trace an obsidian blade or flake back to its geological origin. This is one of the rare moments when the silent world before writing offers something almost like a route. A small cutting tool found hundreds of kilometers from its source reveals that either people traveled far, or objects moved through chains of exchange, or both. The evidence remains incomplete, but the implication is powerful. Long before written roads, landscapes are already connected by memory, trust, danger, and desire. Salt may have moved with equal importance, though it often leaves fewer dramatic traces. It is easy to overlook because it dissolves, vanishes into bodies, and rarely survives as a beautiful artifact. Yet salt is essential for health, food preservation, animal management, and taste. In some landscapes, it is abundant, in others, painfully scarce. A community with access to salt springs, coastal flats, or mineral deposits may hold something others need badly. The trade in salt is therefore a trade in survival, not luxury. It may bind distant groups together quietly, through repeated journeys and remembered paths that leave little behind except tools, hearths, and the occasional trace of extraction. Shells are different. They travel visibly. A shell carried inland is a fragment of another world, a small piece of shore in the hands of people who may never see the sea. In graves and settlements far from coasts, shells can become ornaments, markers of identity, signs of prestige, or memories of connection. They may be valued because they are rare, because they shine, because they sound softly when moved, because they come from the edge of land and water, or because stories cling to their place of origin. No single explanation fully accounts for their meaning. A shell can be decoration, currency-like object, sacred material, personal keepsake, and social signal all at once. Exchange also moves ideas, though ideas are harder to excavate than beads. A new way of shaping a blade, grinding grain, building a house, firing clay, decorating pottery, managing animals, or burying the dead may spread with people, with objects, or with stories told at meeting places. An object can teach by being seen. A beautifully polished axe, a woven pattern, a drilled bead, or a strange vessel form may invite imitation. The person who receives it may copy it imperfectly, adapt it, or attach new meanings to it. In this way, prehistoric exchange is not only movement of things, but movement of possibilities. Meeting places must have mattered deeply. A ford in a river, a mountain pass, a seasonal hunting ground, a coastal inlet, a ritual enclosure, a burial landscape, or a village known for abundance could become a point where groups encounter one another. These meetings are not always peaceful. Exchange can reduce violence, but it can also create envy, rivalry, theft, and obligation. A rare material may make its owner impressive and vulnerable at the same time. A route may bring marriage partners and news, but also disease, enemies, and dangerous rumours. Connection is never innocent. It expands the world while making it harder to control. In the absence of writing, trust has to be carried by people, marks, habits, and reputation. A group known to cheat may find doors closing before any treaty is broken on paper. A family known for generous feasts may gather allies. A craft specialist may gain importance because others recognize the quality of the work. A traveller who knows several landscapes may become valuable not only for what he carries, but for what he remembers, who has surplus, who has suffered drought. Where a path is blocked, which group is mourning, which marriage might be arranged, which conflict should be avoided. Before written messages, people themselves are messages. The movement of materials can also create inequality. Some goods are ordinary where they originate and precious where they arrive. A stone common near one mountain may become a symbol of status in a distant lowland. Metal ores, once their use begins, add new tensions because they require special knowledge of sources, heat, transformation, and skilled making. Amber, jade, turquoise, marine shell, fine flint, and pigments may acquire values far beyond practical use. The more distant the origin, the more powerful the object may seem, distance itself becomes part of value. To possess something from beyond the known horizon is to possess a visible relationship with elsewhere. Yet the routes themselves often remain invisible. There are no written itineraries, no merchant diaries, no lists of prices, no border records. Archaeologists reconstruct these worlds from distributions where objects are found, where raw materials originate, how styles cluster, how technologies spread, how bodies move according to chemical traces in teeth and bones. These methods can reveal surprising networks, but they cannot restore every conversation. A bead may have crossed 10 hands or one long journey. A polished axe may have been traded, inherited, stolen, gifted, or carried by a migrating family. What survives in the record suggests connection. The exact human drama is usually gone. At sunset, a traveller approaches a village with a bundle wrapped in hide. Inside may be salt, shell, stone, pigment, or something less visible but equally valuable news. People notice before he reaches the hearths. Dogs bark, children stare. Elders measure his posture, his ornaments, the way he carries himself. He brings distance into the village, and with distance comes possibility. No clay tablet records the exchange that follows. No written map marks the path he took, but after he leaves, an object remains, a story remains, an obligation remains, and perhaps a new idea begins to root itself in local hands. Before words harden into contracts, the ancient world is already connected by things that travel farther than memory alone. Power enters the ancient world before writing without announcing itself in carved titles. It does not yet need a palace wall covered in victories, or a royal seal, or a list of taxes owed to a throne. It appears more quietly, in who speaks first at a gathering, who receives the largest share of meat, who owns the rarest ornaments, who can call others to work, who gives a feast large enough to leave people indebted, who claims a closer relationship with ancestors, spirits, dangerous places, or the turning of the seasons. Authority before inscriptions is harder to see because it does not leave speeches behind. It leaves patterns, larger houses, richer graves, special buildings, controlled storage, unusual objects, repeated gatherings, and signs that some people could persuade or compel many hands to serve a purpose beyond the needs of one household. A small community can make decisions through kinship, age, skill, memory, and reputation. A great hunter may be respected because people eat when he reads the land well. A healer may be feared and needed because she knows plants, bodies, and rituals others do not. An elder may hold influence because she remembers marriages, debts, boundaries, and losses. A craft specialist may gain status because rare skill turns raw material into valued objects. None of this automatically creates a king. Power begins as influence, and influence can remain fluid for a long time. Yet as food is stored, monuments rise, exchange networks widen, and settlements grow denser, influence can harden. The person who once advised may begin to command. The household that once hosted may begin to dominate. Feasting is one of the most revealing clues. A feast looks generous, and it may truly be generous. But generosity can be a tool as sharp as flint. To feed many people requires surplus, planning, labour, vessels, fuel, animals or grain, and the ability to gather guests at the right moment. When a host gives more than others can easily return, gratitude becomes obligation. A feast can settle conflict, mark a marriage, honour the dead, renew alliances, or celebrate the harvest. But it can also display power. The full stomach remembers. The empty hand remembers who filled it. Scholars still debate how often prehistoric feasting served political ambition rather than communal ritual. But what survives in the records suggests that food was never only food when many people gathered to consume it in public. Prestige goods work in a similar way. A necklace of distant shells, a finely polished axe, a rare stone blade, a copper ornament, a carved object, or a vessel made with unusual skill can speak without words. It says that the wearer or owner has access to distance, labour, knowledge, or relationships others do not. In a world without written ranks, the body itself can become a document. Ornaments, scars, hairstyles, clothing, pigments, and carried objects may mark age, achievement, kinship, ritual role or status. The evidence remains incomplete because fabric, hair, paint, and skin vanish so easily, leaving only fragments of what must once have been a rich visual language of identity. Ritual authority may have been especially powerful because it links human uncertainty to unseen order. Farming villages depend on rain, fertility, healthy animals, stored grain, and protection from disease. No one can fully control these things. A person or group believed to mediate with ancestors, spirits, gods, or forces of the landscape may gain influence that ordinary strength cannot match. Such authority is difficult to reconstruct. A strange building may be a shrine, a meeting house, a storage centre, a ritual kitchen, or several of these at once. A burial with unusual objects may belong to a leader, a healer, a specialist, a child of important kin, or someone feared after death. No single explanation fully accounts for the traces. Still, repeated patterns of special treatment show that some lives, and some deaths, were set apart. Controlled labour is perhaps the clearest sign that power is becoming more than reputation. When many people dig a ditch, raise a mound, move heavy stones, build an enclosure, terrace a slope, or maintain large storage spaces, coordination is visible in the ground. The work may be voluntary, festive, seasonal, religious, obligatory, coerced, or some mixture of all these. Later written societies liked to describe labour as commanded by rulers, but before writing the situation may be more subtle. People can work because they believe, because they owe, because they fear exclusion, because their ancestors did it, because a feast follows, because refusal would shame them, or because someone has become strong enough to demand it. Power rarely needs only one mechanism. One lesser-known detail is that inequality can appear before cities and before formal states. Some prehistoric graves and houses show striking differences in wealth, diet, or treatment, long before kings are named in texts. Chemical analysis of bones can reveal that some people ate differently from others. Grave goods can show unequal access to rare materials. House size can suggest different levels of household power. At the same time, archaeologists must be careful. A rich grave does not always equal a ruler. A large house does not always mean domination. Some societies place wealth with the dead to remove it from circulation, honour a lineage, or mark ritual roles rather than political rank. The ancient world before writing keeps forcing caution because the signs are strong, but the labels are missing. Authority also depends on memory. Without written law, rules live in people and practice. Who may plant where, who may marry whom, who owes labour, who inherits animals, who can speak for the ancestors, who may enter a sacred place, who controls stored food in crisis. These matters are remembered and enforced socially. A leader's power may rest on being the keeper of such memory, or on having supporters who repeat the version of memory that benefits him. This is where oral tradition can become political. The past is not only remembered, it is used. A lineage can claim that its ancestors first cleared the field, first built the shrine, first buried the dead beneath the mound. Whether every claim is true may matter less than whether enough people accept it. There is a shadow side to this. As power gathers, dependence deepens. Stored grain can save a village. But if one household controls the store, hunger becomes leverage. Ritual knowledge can comfort a community, but it can also frighten people into obedience. Exchange networks bring rare goods, but those who control access to them may become gatekeepers of status. Feasts create unity, but they can also create debt. The same structures that bind people together can begin to rank them. By night, the village centre is bright with fire. Food is being distributed. Visitors sit where custom places them. Certain people wear ornaments that catch the light. Others carry vessels, cut meat, tend animals, or wait to be served. No scribe records who outranks whom. No law code fixes the order. Yet everyone present knows more than the ground will ever preserve. They know who must be watched, who must be thanked, who must not be offended. Who can call labour when the next monument needs repair, or the next harvest must be guarded. Before inscriptions declare power, power lives in memory, food, bodies, debts, and fear. It has not yet written its name, but it has already begun to shape the world. A settlement becomes something different when strangers can live inside it and still belong to the same daily machine. In a small village, most faces are known through kinship, marriage, rivalry, age, or long habit. A person's place is remembered by others because everyone has watched everyone else grow, work, fail, feast, mourn, and age. But as some settlements grow larger, memory begins to strain. More houses press together, more hearths smoke at dawn, more children run through alleys. More goods enter, more food must be stored, more waste must be moved, more labour must be organised, more disputes must be settled among people who may not share the same close ancestry. The ancient world before writing is not yet a world of written laws, but in these crowded places, the need for durable memory becomes harder to ignore. The first large settlements are not all alike. Some grow from farming villages, some gather around ritual centres, some sit at trade routes, river crossings, fertile plains, or places where water can be controlled. Some are dense but not fully urban in the later sense. Some have no clear palace or royal tomb, which unsettles older assumptions that cities must begin with kings. Scholars still debate when a large settlement should be called a town, a proto-city, or a true city. Because size alone does not explain how people live together. What matters is the new density of relationships. Food producers, craft workers, ritual specialists, traders, builders, herders, and administrators begin to depend on one another in ways that cannot be managed only by face-to-face memory. In these places, storage grows into an institution. A household pit holds family survival. A communal granary or temple storehouse holds something larger and more dangerous. Grain collected from many fields must be received, measured, guarded, redistributed, and remembered. Sheep, goats, cattle, oil, beer, textiles, tools, and labour may also pass through central hands. The question is no longer simply who filled one basket, but who contributed how much, who is owed what share, who worked on which day, and who has the authority to decide. A pile of grain is never only grain when many people are hungry and many hands helped produce it. It becomes politics in edible form. Temples and ritual centres may play an especially important role in this transition, though their exact functions vary. A sacred building can gather offerings, organise feasts, store goods, sponsor craft production, and anchor community identity. It can make economic activity feel cosmic, not merely practical. Grain given to a temple is not the same as grain given to a neighbour. Labour spent repairing a shrine is not the same as labour spent repairing one family's roof. When divine, ancestral. Or ritual authority stands behind storage and redistribution. Administration gains emotional force. The evidence remains incomplete, because buildings rarely explain themselves, and later categories like temple, warehouse, palace, and workshop may overlap in ways modern language separates too neatly. Workshops add another layer in a crowded settlement. Not everyone has to produce all the same things. Some people may spend more time shaping stone, firing pottery, weaving textiles, working bone, carving seals, making beads, brewing, baking, building, or smelting metal where that technology has appeared. Specialization increases skill, but it also increases dependence. A potter may need grain from someone else's field. A shepherd may need vessels made by someone who owns no herd. A ritual center may need cloth, ornaments, food, and labor from many sources. Exchange becomes daily, not occasional. The settlement becomes a web of needs, and webs need memory if they are not to tear. Crowding changes the senses of life. There is more noise animals penned near houses, grinding stones, hammering, voices, crying children, dogs, carts or sledges where used, the slap of wet clay, the scrape of baskets, the crackle of ovens. There is more smell smoke, dung, fermenting grain, hides, sweat, mud, cooking fat, stored food, and waste. There is also more surveillance. In dense settlement, people are seen. Their labour, absence, wealth, generosity, laziness, illness. And alliances become public in new ways. Privacy narrows, reputation spreads faster. A quarrel in one courtyard may become known across the settlement by nightfall. Before written courts, social pressure remains a powerful law. But social pressure alone cannot manage everything. A large settlement must solve problems of water, storage, building maintenance, waste, defence, ritual scheduling, and distribution. Someone must decide where a wall goes, who repairs a canal, who cleans a shared space, who contributes to a feast, who receives food after a poor harvest. These decisions may be made by councils, elders, ritual authorities, powerful households, emerging chiefs, or institutions whose names are now lost. No single explanation fully accounts for the variety of early urban life. Some places may have been hierarchical from the beginning. Others may have experimented with more collective forms of order. The absence of writing makes it difficult to hear the political arguments that must have filled these streets. One lesser-known truth is that cities do not simply rise because people want greatness. They can rise because leaving becomes harder. Fields, ancestors, stores, workshops, shrines, debts, and kinship all tie people down. A bad season may push more families toward a central store. Conflict may drive people behind walls or into denser communities. Trade may reward concentration. Ritual may require gathering. Population may grow until older patterns of movement no longer work. The city waiting for writing is not always a dream. Sometimes it is a solution to pressure, and sometimes it becomes a pressure of its own. In such a place, symbols begin to multiply. Seals mark containers, tokens count goods, marks identify ownership, pottery styles signal group habits, buildings express authority through size and placement, pathways organize movement, burial locations distinguish memory. The settlement itself becomes a readable surface, though not yet a written text. A person who knows the place can read where power sits, where food is held, where craft is made, where outsiders enter, where the dead belong, and where ordinary people should not go. Later writing will make some of these arrangements explicit, but the grammar of power is already built into mud brick, stone, timber, and packed earth. As evening settles over the growing town, smoke no longer rises from one circle, but from hundreds of roofs and courtyards. A central building catches the last light. Somewhere, grain is being sealed away. Somewhere, a craft worker sets aside unfinished beads or pots. Somewhere, an argument over obligation waits for an elder, a steward, or a ritual official to settle it. No archive yet preserves the dispute, no tablet lists every worker, but the need is there, thickening in the air like smoke. Memory has grown too large for speech alone. The city is waiting for writing, not because humans have suddenly become intelligent enough to invent it, but because their own success has created a world too crowded to remember without new tools. At some point, a mark stops being only a mark. A line pressed into clay no longer means merely that a hand touched it. A small picture of a jar, a head of grain, an animal, or a vessel begins to stand for something that is absent. A seal impression no longer only closes a container. It remembers responsibility. A token is no longer only counted and stored. It becomes part of a larger system of trust, control, and obligation. No trumpet sounds when this happens. No one announces the birth of history. The change is gradual, practical, and almost modest. Yet in the crowded settlements and temple storehouses of the ancient world, symbols begin to harden into writing. The road toward writing is not a single road, and it is not the same everywhere. Different societies create durable sign systems under different pressures, at different times, and for different reasons. Some signs begin as pictures, some as tallies, some as ownership marks, some as seals, some as mnemonic devices, and some remain symbolic without ever becoming full writing. Scholars still debate the boundary between proto-writing and writing, because the difference can be subtle. A symbol may communicate meaning without recording speech. A writing system, in the stricter sense, usually allows language itself to be represented, so that names, sounds, grammar, and more complex statements can be preserved. But the transformation from symbol to script is rarely clean. It is a long crossing through mud, clay, memory, and need. In the earliest administrative worlds, clay is everywhere. It is dug from riverbanks, shaped by hand, marked while wet, dried, fired by accident or intention, and kept because it can outlast the person who made it. A clay tablet is not glamorous at first. It is not a poem. It may record grain, animals, workers, oil, beer, textiles, or deliveries. Its marks are small acts of control. Someone has counted, someone has received, someone has distributed, someone may later be held accountable. In this sense, writing begins close to the stomach and the storehouse. It emerges from the problem of keeping track of material life when too many people, goods, and duties have gathered in one place. Tokens and seals belong to this threshold. Earlier, a token might stand for a unit of grain or an animal. Later, instead of keeping many little counters sealed inside a clay envelope, someone can press their shapes onto the outside. Then perhaps the marks themselves become enough. The counter becomes an impression. The impression becomes a sign. The sign becomes part of a system. This is not the only path toward writing, and the details remain debated, but the logic is powerful. Once a mark can replace an object that replaced another object, memory has taken another step away from the body. It can now sit on a surface, visible to people who know the code. Pictorial signs may seem easy to read at first. A drawing of a fish appears to mean fish. A head may mean a person. A bowl may mean a bowl. But even simple pictures become complicated quickly. Does the fish mean one fish? Many fish? Fish as food? Fish as an offering? Fish as a sound in a spoken word? or the name of a place associated with fish. Writing grows when signs escape the limits of pictures. A sign can begin to represent a sound, an idea, a category, a quantity, or a name. This is where the ancient mind performs a remarkable act of compression. The world, with all its animals, grain, labour, debts, gods, and people, is reduced into repeatable marks. Names are a crucial step. A counted object is important, but a recorded name changes social memory. A person can now be attached to a transaction beyond the reach of spoken witnesses. A worker, official, owner, donor, prisoner, ruler, or god can be held in clay, stone, bone, wood, or other material. The written name is still fragile, because it depends on a system others can read, but it offers a new form of survival. Before writing, the dead remain through burial, story, ancestry, and objects. With writing, a name can travel across time with unnatural sharpness, yet this sharpness is selective. The earliest written records often preserve the concerns of institutions more than the inner lives of ordinary people. Writing saves some voices by ignoring many others. There is a dry irony here. The first people to be recorded are not always the people most later audiences want to meet. The tablets may not tell us what a mother whispered to a child, what a farmer feared in a drought, what a potter thought while shaping clay, or what a mourner remembered beside a grave. They may tell us that a quantity of barley was issued, that workers received rations, that animals belonged to an institution, that offerings were made. The goods move from one hand to another. These records can feel cold, but they are revolutionary. They prove that memory has become bureaucratic. They also remind us that writing does not simply reveal the past. It filters the past through the needs of those powerful or practical enough to make records. Ritual and administration often stand close together. Offerings must be counted. Festivals must be supplied. Temples must store goods. Priests, attendants, craft workers, herders, brewers, bakers, and labourers may all depend on organised distribution. A god's house can also be an economic centre. A sacred calendar can demand practical accounting. No single explanation fully accounts for the invention of writing, but economic and ritual complexity repeatedly create situations where durable records are useful. When the sacred and the administrative combine, a mark on clay may carry both worldly and cosmic weight. The shift also changes power. A person who can read and make signs controls a rare skill. A scribe, or the earlier specialist who understands marks and seals, becomes a keeper of memory no longer available to everyone equally. Oral memory is shared across a community, though not evenly. Written memory can be stored, restricted, copied, hidden, displayed, and interpreted by specialists. This creates new possibilities and new dangers. A record can protect fairness by preserving what was agreed. It can also strengthen authority by making obligations harder to contest. Once the mark is accepted as proof, the person who controls the mark controls part of the future. Still, writing does not erase the older world overnight. The fireside story continues. The hand still teaches craft. The grave still holds grief. The monument still commands the horizon. The field still obeys rain. The seal, tablet, and sign are added to these older forms of memory, not instantly substituted for them. For a long time, writing remains limited, specialized, and tied to particular institutions. Most people continue to live through speech, gesture, labor, song, and place. The ancient world before writing does not end in a single moment. It recedes unevenly, leaving older habits beneath the new surface of records. A wet tablet lies in the hand of someone who knows what the marks mean. Around him, or her, or them, the settlement breathes with animals, grain dust, smoke, footsteps, and voices. A stylus presses down. The clay receives a sign. The sign dries. Perhaps it will be discarded after its purpose is served. Perhaps fire will harden it by accident. Perhaps it will wait underground for thousands of years. Long after the storehouse falls, the language changes. and the people who understood it become nameless. In that small pressed mark, memory has crossed a threshold. The ancient world has begun to write, and by writing, it has begun to leave a different kind of silence behind. Once writing appears, it casts a long shadow backward. Later people begin to divide time into the written and the unwritten, the historical and the prehistoric, the named and the nameless. The division is useful, but it is also cruel. It makes the older world seem like a dark room waiting for a door to open, when in truth the room was full of voices, footsteps, fires, arguments, songs, hunger, skill, grief, and laughter. The problem is not that nothing happened before writing. The problem is that so much happened in forms that did not survive. The ancient world before writing is not empty. It is overfull, and nearly all of it has been taken from us. Writing preserves certain things with unnatural clarity. A rationalist may outlive the meal. A king's boast may outlive the soldiers who died. A boundary dispute may outlive the field itself. But before writing, no one records the complaint of a tired worker grinding grain until her shoulders ache. No one writes down the private fear of a hunter watching clouds gather over a dangerous pass. No one preserves the exact words spoken over a child's grave, or the insult that started a feud, or the joke that made a group laugh after a failed hunt, or the lullaby that carried a baby through winter. These things were real, and then they were gone. The evidence remains incomplete not because the people lacked lives worth remembering, but because their memories were made of breath. This silence can distort the past. Archaeology sees what survives, and what survives is often hard, buried, burned, or deliberately placed stone tools, pottery, bones, pigments, post holes, walls, graves, seeds, shells, charcoal, metal, impressions in clay. These are precious traces, but they are not neutral. They favour certain activities over others. They preserve killing better than kindness, storage better than conversation, buildings better than beliefs, durable objects better than perishable skills. A stone blade may survive for 50,000 years. A woven basket may vanish in one generation unless conditions are unusually kind. A monument can dominate a landscape long after the small shelters around it disappear. The record makes the heavy look more important than the light. This is why the unwritten past must be approached with both imagination and restraint. Imagination is necessary because without it, the past becomes a cabinet of objects. Restraint is necessary because without it, the objects become mirrors for modern desires. A figurine may be called a goddess too quickly. A painted animal may be turned into a myth we cannot prove. A large building may be labelled a temple. A rich grave may be called a chief. And an unusual skull may be wrapped in a story stronger than the evidence allows. Scholars still debate many such interpretations, and they should. Debate is not weakness. It is what happens when traces are real, but meanings are partial. Some silences are created by preservation, others by power. Even after writing appears, not everyone enters the written record equally. The earliest texts often belong to institutions, administrators, temples, palaces, and elites. They count grain, workers, animals, offerings, and land. They record what needed control. This means writing does not suddenly give humanity a full voice. It gives certain systems a louder one. The poor, the enslaved, the very young, the outsiders, the defeated, the sick, the people whose labour held daily life together. They may remain almost as silent after writing as before. In that sense, the ancient world before writing teaches a lesson that applies even to the written past. Survival in the record is never the same as importance in life. There are also entire kinds of knowledge that writing, when it finally comes, may fail to capture well. A skilled tracker's ability to read a broken reed, a cloud shape, or a faint print in dust is difficult to reduce to signs. The exact pressure used to twist fibre into cord, the sound that tells a potter the clay is right, The smell that warns stored grain is beginning to spoil, the way a healer judges fever by skin and breath. The social intelligence of knowing when a gathering is turning dangerous. These are forms of expertise that often live in bodies. They may be taught for centuries without becoming texts. When they vanish, archaeology may see only their consequences, not their method. The silence hides movement too. People migrated, married, were captured, adopted, exiled, welcomed, and absorbed into other groups. Languages spread, split, disappeared, and transformed. Songs crossed valleys. Techniques travelled with daughters, sons, captives, visitors, healers, and craft workers. A decorative style might move faster than a population. A population might move without leaving a dramatic layer of destruction. A language might vanish while the people genetically remain. Modern methods can trace some of this through ancient DNA, isotopes, material culture, and environmental evidence, but no single explanation fully accounts for every movement. The human past is not a set of clean arrows on a map. It is a fog of journeys, some chosen, some forced, most unnamed, most. Disaster is hidden in the same way. A drought may appear as a change in pollen, a shift in settlement, or a layer of wind-blown dust. A flood may leave sediment but not the cries of those who ran from it. A disease may pass through a community and leave only demographic shadows. A conflict may be visible in broken bones and burned houses, or it may leave almost nothing if bodies were carried away and shelters rebuilt. The ancient world before writing endured catastrophes that no witness describes. Later myths may preserve echoes of some events, but such echoes are difficult to separate from symbol, moral teaching, and transformation through time. Yet silence is not only loss, it also protects the older world from the arrogance of certainty. Because no single voice explains everything, the evidence forces humility. A grave may hold tenderness without letting us name the mourner. A cave wall may hold meaning without yielding its code. A stone circle may preserve labour without revealing the song that paced the work. This incompleteness can be frustrating, but it also keeps the ancient world alive as a mystery grounded in matter. It reminds us that human beings are always more than the records they leave. Near the edge of a vanished settlement, soil covers what remains a hearth, a few bones, a broken blade, seeds burned black, a post hole, a bead lost near a doorway. The people who lived there had names for one another, names for birds, winds, hills, illnesses, moods, tools, kin, and fears. They knew scandals, memories, grudges, jokes, and promises. Almost none of it survives, but the absence is not nothing. It is a shape around what once existed, before writing. History is not silent because people had nothing to say. It is silent because time has taken the sound away. Writing does not arrive like a curtain falling between two worlds. It spreads unevenly, slowly, and for a long time most human memory remains older than script. Even after marks on clay begin to preserve grain, labour, names, offerings, and commands, people still gather round fires. They still teach by hand. They still remember paths through landmarks, songs through repetition, kinship through speech, and grief through burial. A written tablet may sit in a storehouse, but a grandmother still carries the story of who married whom, who betrayed whom, which field was unlucky, which spring failed in a dry year, and which ancestor must not be forgotten. The long shadow of speech does not vanish, because signs have learned to last. This matters because writing can make itself look like the beginning of civilization, when it is really one late development inside a much older human architecture. The first scribes inherit worlds already dense with meaning. They do not invent memory, they capture a portion of it. They do not invent law, ritual, hierarchy, trade, astronomy, or belief. They enter societies where all of these have been growing in spoken, rebuilt, embodied, and ceremonial forms for thousands of years. What survives in the record suggests that writing is not the birth of human complexity. But the moment when certain kinds of complexity become easier for later people to see, older memory systems continue because they do things writing cannot easily do. Speech can adapt instantly to a listener. A story can change its emphasis depending on who is present, what season it is, what danger has returned, what child needs warning, what grief needs softening. Gesture can teach a craft in ways no sign can fully replace. A path walked with an elder can carry layers of meaning that a map flattens. A ritual performed together creates belonging, not because it is recorded, but because bodies move in shared time. Writing stores memory, performance renews it. The ancient world before writing survives wherever memory must be lived again rather than merely consulted. Even in early literate societies, the written word is often rare, specialized, and controlled. Many people may never read the marks that organize part of their lives. They may know that a tablet exists, that a seal matters, that an official has recorded something, but their own world remains largely oral. A worker receives grain because a record says so, yet the worker's personal history still lives in speech. A farmer owes labor that may be counted, but the knowledge of rain, soil, animals, and family duty still passes through practice. A temple stores offerings in written accounts, but the fear, hope, and reverence that bring people there are older than any ledger. The evidence remains incomplete, but it is clear that literacy begins as a narrow light, not a sunrise covering everyone at once. The older world also continues inside myth, when writing eventually records sacred stories, king lists, origin tales, flood memories, heroic journeys, and divine genealogies. It often fixes traditions that have already lived for generations in voice. These written versions may be shaped by scribes, rulers, priests, and local politics, so they cannot be treated as simple windows into deep prehistory. Scholars still debate how much older memory lies behind many early texts, but writing often catches oral tradition midstream. It freezes one form of a story while the living river continues elsewhere. What looks like a beginning on the page may actually be a late surviving branch of something far older. Landscapes preserve this long shadow too. A hill may still be sacred after the reason has changed. A stone circle may attract later ceremonies whose meanings differ from those of its builders. A burial mound may become the home of saints, giants, spirits, or kings in later imagination. A cave once painted by people without writing may be entered centuries later by people who bring new stories to old images. Memory does not simply survive unchanged. It is reused, misunderstood, renewed, and reattached. The ancient world before writing remains beneath later cultures like an older foundation under a house repeatedly rebuilt. There is also a deeper continuity in the human need to make absence present. A cave handprint, a grave offering, a standing stone, a clay token, a seal, and a written name all answer the same fear in different materials that something important may disappear. The handprint says a body was here. The grave says a person still matters. The monument says a community wants the land to remember. The token says an obligation must not be lost. The tablet says a name or number must outlast speech. Writing is new, but the longing behind it is ancient. Human beings have always fought forgetting with whatever they had, and yet forgetting remains stronger than every system invented against it. Most voices are gone, most names are gone, most songs, jokes, warnings, and prayers are gone. The world before writing cannot be fully recovered, and pretending otherwise would be false comfort. But it can be approached. It appears in the polished edge of a tool, in the red stain of ochre, in the curve of a painted animal, in the post holes of a house, in the chemical signature of obsidian, in a seed changed by generations of selection, in a skeleton placed carefully beneath a floor. Each trace is partial. Together they reveal a humanity already thoughtful, anxious, inventive, social, symbolic, and restless. The ancient world before writing is therefore not a prologue to the real story. It is the longest part of the story. It is the time when humans learned to become human in ways that no tablet needed to announce by remembering together, making together, grieving together, moving through dangerous landscapes, returning to favoured places, watching animals and stars, building with stone, counting with clay, storing food against hunger, and trying to hold the dead close. Writing changes the record. But it does not change the fact that history has been unfolding all along. So the old world does not end with the first written sign. It becomes quieter beneath the noise of later records. The tablets speak, the inscriptions boast, the archives count, and the kings begin to fill the walls with their names. But below them lies the deeper human earth, the ash of forgotten hearths, the dust of paths walked without maps, the smoothness of tools held by nameless hands, the buried dead who once knew the voices of everyone around them. To look back before writing is to accept a gentler kind of uncertainty. Not every mystery can be solved, not every mark can be translated, not every grave can tell us whether it was love, fear, duty, or hope that placed the body there. But uncertainty is not emptiness. It is the space where humility begins. The people of that unwritten world were not waiting for history to start. They were living it completely, under cold stars, beside rivers, in caves, on plains, near fires, in villages, among animal, stones, seeds, and stories. Writing gives the past a sharper edge, but the older past remains wider than the written one. It reminds us that most of what matters in human life is fragile. A voice can vanish, a touch can vanish, a path can vanish under forest or sand. A civilization can leave only broken walls, and a family can leave only a bead in the soil. Still, something persists. The need to remember persists. The urge to mark a wall, shape a tool, bury the dead, return to a place, tell a child where danger lies, and leave some trace against time persists. And in that persistence, the world before writing is not lost entirely. It is dim, but not gone. It waits in stone, bone, pigment, seed, and silence. It waits beneath later cities and inside later myths. It waits whenever a landscape feels older than its names. Long before the first scribe bent over clay, human beings were already making memory out of firelight, footsteps, and breath. The words came later. The story had already begun.